It was a cold, rainy night at Central Station. The last trains had departed, and the usually bustling station was now nearly deserted. Emily, a young woman in her mid-20s, was returning from a late visit to her parents. The rain fell in heavy sheets, soaking the pavement and making it glisten under the dim streetlights. Emily clutched her umbrella, shivering as she glanced at her phone. The next bus wasn't due for another hour, and the thought of standing alone in the rain that long made her uneasy. She decided to call a taxi instead. Within minutes, a yellow cab pulled up to the curb. The driver, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a friendly smile, rolled down the window. "Need a ride, miss?" Emily nodded, grateful for the shelter. She climbed into the back seat and gave the driver her address. As the taxi pulled away from the station, Emily settled into the seat, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had been creeping over her. The driver made small talk, asking her about her day and where she was headed. His tone was polite, but something about his eyes made Emily uncomfortable. They were cold, calculating, and seemed to linger on her a little too long. "So, what do you do?" the driver asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "I'm a graphic designer," Emily replied, forcing a smile. "Just visiting my parents tonight." "That's nice," he said. "Family is important." The rain continued to pour, the sound of it beating against the car's roof. Emily stared out the window, watching the city lights blur as they drove. The route seemed unfamiliar, and she realized they were taking a detour. "Excuse me, but isn't this the long way?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The driver's smile faded slightly. "Oh, just avoiding some construction. Don't worry, I'll get you home safe." Emily's unease grew. She discreetly checked her phone, hoping to see a map of their location, but the signal was weak and the screen remained blank. The driver turned onto a deserted road, lined with trees that loomed like dark sentinels. The car slowed down, and the driver's demeanor changed. The friendly facade dropped, revealing a more sinister expression. "You know, it's not safe for a girl like you to be out alone at night." Emily's heart raced. "What do you mean?" The driver pulled the car to a stop. "I mean, anything could happen out here. You never know who you might run into." Panic set in as Emily realized the true danger she was in. She reached for the door handle, but the locks clicked down. The driver turned in his seat, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Now, why don't you just relax?" he said, pulling out a length of rope from the passenger seat. Emily's instincts kicked in. She screamed and lunged for the front seat, trying to grab the steering wheel. The driver cursed and tried to restrain her, but she managed to claw at his face, drawing blood. The car swerved wildly, the driver momentarily losing control. Emily's desperate struggle continued as she kicked and fought, her survival instincts in overdrive. The driver managed to grab her wrist, twisting it painfully, but Emily used her other hand to yank the gear shift into neutral. The car slowed, and she slammed her elbow into his face, causing him to grunt in pain and loosen his grip. She took the chance to unlock the door and tumble out into the rain-soaked street. The impact jarred her, but adrenaline pushed her to her feet. She ran blindly into the darkness, the driver's furious shouts echoing behind her. The rain hammered down, blurring her vision and soaking her to the bone. She stumbled through the trees, branches scratching at her skin. She could hear the driver's footsteps pounding after her, his curses growing louder. Emily's heart pounded as she ran deeper into the woods, the trees closing in around her. The darkness was almost suffocating, and the rain made the ground slippery and treacherous. She could hear the driver crashing through the underbrush behind her, his rage propelling him forward. Desperation fueled her movements. She knew she had to find a way to outsmart him, to hide or find help. Her mind raced, trying to think of a plan. She spotted a large, hollowed-out tree and ducked inside, holding her breath as she listened to the driver's footsteps drawing nearer. "Come out, little girl," he taunted, his voice dripping with menace. "You can't hide forever." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She pressed herself against the damp, rotting wood, praying he wouldn't find her. The footsteps paused, and she could hear him breathing heavily just outside her hiding place. The driver's footsteps moved away, and Emily allowed herself a moment of relief. She waited, listening intently, until she was sure he had gone. Slowly, she crept out of the tree and began to move silently through the woods, hoping to put as much distance between them as possible. She stumbled upon an old cabin, half hidden by the trees. It looked abandoned, but it was her best chance. She approached cautiously, trying the door. It creaked open, and she slipped inside, closing it quietly behind her. The cabin was dark and musty, filled with old furniture and cobwebs. Emily searched for something to defend herself with, finding a rusty old knife in the kitchen. She gripped it tightly, knowing it might be her only chance if the driver found her. Minutes passed like hours as she waited, every creak of the old cabin making her jump. Then, she heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside. Her grip on the knife tightened as the door creaked open. The driver stepped into the cabin, his eyes scanning the darkness. "I know you're in here," he said softly. "You can't run forever." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She crouched behind a piece of furniture, ready to strike if he came too close. The driver moved slowly, methodically, checking each corner of the room. "I don't want to hurt you," he lied. "Just come out, and we can talk." Emily knew better. She held her position, waiting for the right moment. The driver was getting closer, his footsteps heavy on the old wooden floor. When he was just a few feet away, she sprang up, slashing at him with the knife. The driver yelled in surprise and pain, stumbling back as blood flowed from the wound. Emily didn't hesitate. She ran for the door, her heart pounding in her ears. The driver lunged after her, but his injuries slowed him down. Emily burst out of the cabin and into the rain, sprinting as fast as she could. She could hear him behind her, but the distance was growing. The trees began to thin, and she saw the lights of a nearby road. Hope surged through her as she made her way towards it. She burst out of the woods and onto the road, waving frantically at an approaching car. The driver, a middle-aged woman, stopped and rolled down the window. "What's wrong?" "Please, help me." Emily gasped. "There's a man. He's trying to kill me." The woman's eyes widened, and she quickly unlocked the door. "Get in." Emily scrambled into the car just as the fake taxi driver emerged from the woods. The woman hit the gas, and they sped away, leaving him behind. The police were called, and Emily recounted her terrifying ordeal. The driver was never found, despite a thorough search of the area. Emily's life slowly returned to normal, but the memory of that night haunted her. She moved to a new city, trying to put the past behind her. But every time she saw a taxi, her heart would race, and she would remember the cold, calculating eyes of the man who had hunted her. Emily knew she had been lucky to escape, but the scars of that night would remain with her forever. She became more cautious, always aware of her surroundings, never taking her safety for granted again. And though she tried to move on, she couldn't shake the feeling that, somewhere out there, the maniac taxi driver was still hunting for his next victim.